A lot of stuff that we struggle with as copywriters is not just something that's exclusive to copywriters. It's a problem that people in every field of performance have to overcome. What do you think the real reason is that copywriters struggle to hit income goals?
Because they can't hit that goal, which is one common issue, or the other one that I see, which is a much more common, which is they can't sustain it. We've created this culture that's very much results orientated.
It's a lot about having a short-term perspective versus a long-term perspective. I think a lot of people, they become entrepreneurs to escape problems that they don't like in other parts of their life. Well, those very things get magnified when you're in business.
What's the point of hitting 20K a month if you're having a mental breakdown? We need to be really clear about why we want the money we want.
How would you recommend somebody go about getting that process moving, where they know they're leaning into themselves a bit more?
In the entrepreneurial space, you hear all the time, you should pursue your passion. I think what you should do is pursue your...
I'm genuinely curious. Do you think that this is an industry that is worthwhile pursuing to create a six-figure income for yourself?
There's a confusion here between...
All right, so today we're here with George Katz. George, please introduce yourself and let everybody know what you've done and who you are.
Sure. So over the last 15 years, in some form or another, I've been a mindset and performance coach, working with people ranging from ex-Navy SEALs, UFC grappling coach, dating coaches, a myriad of copywriters, some making 10K, some making 300K plus. And I've essentially been in their corner, helping them either get an edge, keep an edge, or gain back an edge in whatever way that might look like.
Thanks so much. Yeah, so George has done so many things. That's why I want him to introduce himself, because I always forget, how many different types of people that you've helped. And I think it's very important for people that are watching this to know that a lot of stuff that we struggle with as copywriters is not just something that's exclusive to copywriters. It's a problem that people in every field of performance have to overcome, And so that's really why I'm excited to chat with you, because I think there's going to be a lot of insights for copywriters. The biggest thing I would love to know is, what do you think the real reason is that copywriters struggle to hit income goals?
That's a great question. And it's really a question of, why do I think entrepreneurs struggle to hit income goals, right? And it's a multi-part question in a sense, because there's two ways to think about this. And the first way is, are you asking me because they can't hit that goal, which is one common reason, like one common issue, or the other one that I see, which is a much more common, which is they can't sustain it. And that one seems to be much more of an issue, because then we're talking about, well, why can't they sustain it? And generally the reason they can't sustain it is sort of tied to why they can't make it in the first place. It has to do with the fact that we've created this culture of, like, beyond the scope of entrepreneurship that's very much results orientated. And those results, we try and get to the apex of whatever it is we're trying to get to as fast as we can, as if getting there means that we're going to have the energy or the capability of staying up there where the air is thin, and then we find ourselves falling down. And if we're going to get into much more detail about that, it really comes down to a few things. Humans are not very forward-thinking. We're pretty short-sighted human beings. So we get on this idea of, like, where the next dollar is going to come from the next client, and what we have to do immediately today. Maybe we need to write the content, whatever it might be, without any real foresight for the long game, And because of that, we start falling into these same patterns, financial patterns, client patterns, so forth and so on. And then the other kind of major aspect of this is this idea that's built into the way marketing is presented, where it's like, if you follow this system, or if you do this, if you do that, you're not going to have to face your fears. You're not going to have to face the difficulties. You're not going to have to do outreach. You're not going to have to sell yourself. You're just going to have to write the copy, and that's all you're going to do. And people are going to love you. And as long as they love you, they're going to keep giving you money. And that's just incredibly idealistic and not realistic, and not, it shows a lack of understanding of how business and marketing actually works.
So it's a lot about having a short-term perspective versus a long-term perspective, and then also having expectations that you don't have to deal with some of the things that I think a lot of people, they become entrepreneurs to escape problems that they don't like in other parts of their life, right? And so it's like, well, those very things get magnified when you're in business, because let's say, for example, that you're more introverted, and so you don't enjoy the social aspects of your 9 to 5. Now it's like, well, if I'm a copywriter, I can escape that whole life, because I can work from home, hide behind my laptop, and not have to face people so much. But as you get into the industry, you realize the harsh reality is you probably have to socialize and talk to people even more than you did in a 9 to 5, because otherwise you're not going to be able to get premium clients and build real relationships and strategic partners, right? So is that the high level reason that you'd say copywriters struggle to even break into the industry and get income, or is it more about the copywriters who are already making income?
I'd say that's more for the copywriters that are making income. The ones that are trying to break in, the issue is much more like the ones that kind of are plateauing and they just can't seem to break through. I rescind that a little bit. There's overlap in these problems, in the sense that what I just described is a big part of it, and the other part of it is that most copywriters and most entrepreneurs fall under the guise of being people who tie their self-worth to their performance. A lot of their identity becomes entrenched in their abilities or how they stand compared to their peers or how much money they're making. Like the amount of times I've heard someone say they want to make 10K a month, but with no idea of what that actually means for them. Like it's just some arbitrary measure that nobody knows why they want to hit it. And they kind of just put themselves on this perpetual scaling thing of, well, I want to make 10K and I want to be an A-list copywriter and I want to do this and I want to do that. But there's no understanding of what any of that means. Like, what is an A-list copywriter? What is that? And what makes you think that being an A-list copywriter means you're going to make the most money? Or what makes you think that to be an A-list copywriter means you have to be the best at writing copy? Like, so it's this idea of these goals that seem to be just bigger, faster, stronger, more grandiose, with no real understanding of what they actually mean or why that's important or why would you want to get there. Like, what's the point of hitting 20K a month if you're having a mental breakdown? Like, what good is that? What good is it to make 10K a month if you're beating yourself up every month because you're afraid that you're going to lose a client? Like, we need to be really clear about why we want the money we want and what that actually translates to in our lives. And also, that's not a motivating thing. Like, you're not motivated to go and make 10K. Most people are not motivated to get healthy. Most people don't go to the gym because they want to get healthy. They go to the gym because they want to have a six-pack, because they want to look sexy, because they want to get revenge on their ex or whatever it might be. And in that same way, money is a placeholder. It's an abstraction. So when you chase that, when you use that as your motivation and then these hurdles come in the way, it shouldn't be surprising that then you struggle to like have the motivation, because it's just an arbitrary thing that you don't really know why you want it.
That's very interesting. We have a lot of crossover in the work. I mean, we've chatted about this before, that, you know, some of the ways that I coach copywriters and I've seen from my private clients, it ends up putting me into this role of being more of a mindset performance coach than really a strategic advisor for them, you know. And I find it so interesting because it always comes back to these same things. I always ask them, why do you want this? Okay, you want to make 25K a month. Why? You know, with some of the younger copywriters, they want to become multi-millionaires. And a little bit of digging shows you that they actually just want to move out of their parents' house so they feel independent for the first time in their life. And so, like, multiple millions of dollars is just an amplified like it just amplifies the emotion of I want to feel independent, and that's what independence represents. The car and the penthouse and the crazy life just represents independence. And then once they move out, maybe they still want to be multimillionaires, but it's for a different reason, maybe a deeper reason than just I want to feel independent, you know? So I find this stuff very interesting, but I also find that it's, as a coach, it's a little challenging sometimes to bridge it with action. To say, okay, you know, we're sitting here, we're talking about this concept, you know, you're going to figure out your why. And I also don't want my client to say, okay, I'm just going to sit here and think about this for the next 3 months. Why do I want this? And then they don't really take action. So it's like, how do you bridge that, where you get somebody to actually, you know, think about their why, or help a copywriter think about their why, but at the same time, not just, you know, just sit there and sort of think about things all the time instead of actually going and doing stuff.
So the way I look at that is, the problem people have is not understanding that taking action is about the fidelity of the action you're taking. And what I mean by that is, if you want to get better at cold outreach right now, all you have to do is do more of it, and you will iteratively improve that process. As you're taking those steps to improve that process, what's going to happen most likely is you're going to run into these barriers, these emotional barriers, these barriers of meaning that are going to they're going to come up, right? Like, you're going to get 5 people telling you no or whatever, and then you're going to think to yourself, well, I'm not good enough. And it's going to touch on something that's already been there before you decided to be a copywriter. The problem is thinking that the path forward is going to become easy once you take care of the emotional stuff. Like, that the emotional stuff is somehow a panacea to taking the action, when what it actually is, it supports the action, but you still need to be moving, because a creature that's not moving stagnates and is at risk of whatever threats are around it. So you need to keep moving. We don't need you to get a perfect sense of your vision, but we do need you to get clearer on it. And we need to think about, what are the action steps we can take you right now to get you closer to where you think you want to be. We can always make the adjustments and the calibrations as we go. The last thing I want is somebody to feel good about their problems, but for that not to translate into results and action. So it's a combination. It's a combination of getting them still moving and not worrying so much about the quality of those actions.
Mm-hmm.
It's then addressing the emotional stuff as it comes up, as they're moving forward on that path. And the third thing is, it's good preparation. People do not prepare well. People don't prepare well for goals, because the thinking of goals, the way people think about goal setting, whether it's copywriting or whatever it is, people think about goals in a very idealistic fashion, which is like, I'm going to have this grandiose goal, and these are the action steps, and then I'm going to get on board, and I'm going to start taking those actions, and they're going to get me to the goal. The reality is, that's the easy part, right? Like, if it's sunny outside and it's nice weather, running is easy, yeah? But like, if it's raining, it's not so easy. It's a lot harder, because you've got all these excuses. Now you've got environmental challenges and all this stuff. When you prepare for a goal correctly, what you're actually doing is preparing for all the blind spots and the obstructions that keep you from maintaining the momentum and consistency that would get you to your goal. It's a very different thinking process. It's actually about preparing for all the things that would throw you off the path, versus idealistically jumping into going after the goal with all this drive and determination and this sort of reckless optimism, we'll call it, reckless optimism.
So it's essentially about preparing for all the downsides that are going to come, so that you can handle those and those don't throw you off track. It's like you're sending 1,000, let's say you send 1,000 emails. It's great to sit, you know, you and me, let's say I'm learning from you, or I'm getting coaching support from you, and I say, okay, George, I want I want to send these 1,000 emails, but I'm scared of rejection. It's not so much about sitting there until I feel no longer afraid of rejection, until I feel better, but it's more like, okay, let's say you send 100 emails. Let's work on preparing you for that one email where someone responds negatively and says no. That doesn't stop me from sending the next 900 emails. It's like I face it and I keep moving. Is that an application of what you're saying?
Yeah, so you're doing the emails, and we're looking at it from a pragmatic side. We're getting you to go to your edge. That's going to bring up emotional stuff. We're going to address the emotional stuff. I've got processes specifically for that. But I wouldn't work with someone on the emotional stuff until I can see that they're taking some level of action. Because that's kind of the important part. If they're taking a level of action and then they're running into this emotional blockage or these frictions, we can deal with that. But if it's the other way around, where they're not taking any action, but they want to address the emotional content, that becomes a kind of masturbatory exercise. It doesn't really help the process. And sometimes I'll even be working with people of a one-off session, and in those sessions, I treat it like it's life or death, and that I have to do whatever is in my power to the best level that is required for that individual to get them to take action. And sometimes that taking action might be completely strategical. Sometimes that might be deeper emotional work. Sometimes it might just be just tactical stuff. It depends on what the person needs. Not every the amount of times people have come to me and said they had a money mindset problem when all it really was is they're not doing the pragmatic things you need to do to have money as an entrepreneur. And I'm at fault for this too, but just a fundamental one is just knowing your numbers.
Yeah. I have a health mindset issue, George. George, I have a health mindset issue. It's like, oh, you're not going to the gym. No, but I have a health mindset issue.
Exactly. So I try to make sure that as somebody in this space, because I really hate the word mindset, and you know that, and we've talked about that.
Yeah.
That we don't get into this mistaken idea that it's all about that it's always about hitting things at this sort of deep emotional level, and that if we don't do that, then we can't get anywhere and that we can't achieve anything, because it's not about that. It's about the yin and yang of pragmatic action on the outside with, hey, are there some emotional frictions here? Are there things going on here that are sort of they're distorting the way that you're looking at the terrain ahead of you, And I mean, even an example of that was this whole situation I've run in here in Bangkok where I lost my passport, but I wanted to get into Bali. Because of my mindset, because of who I am, I literally spent 48 hours trying to find a loophole to get into Bali. And I was leaving no stone unturned, right? I was thinking about people I know who might have Indonesian relatives, who might know someone in immigration, all these possible avenues that I could approach to resolve this, because I'm determined to make it happen. Whereas somebody else might say, "Oh, well, I've looked up what the immigration rules are, and they're this, and I can't do it, so I'm just going to have to give up." And sometimes that can be a legitimate thing, but sometimes that can also be just an obstruction of that person's worth, beliefs, maybe even sometimes their fears. That those things get in the way of them actually seeing the opportunities and avenues forward. And one of the things that makes my work really easy, and that I look for when I'm working with someone, is that they're already taking action and they're already resourceful. Because if they have those two things, then the work I do with them will exponentially help them.
I like that, yeah, because I also have that requirement with my clients. Part of why I didn't spend a lot of time building a massive, marketing presence for the dojo is just because of that. It's because I found that people that found me were already more resourceful. And so it made it a lot easier to work with them, because they found me, they can figure a lot of stuff out by themselves. Whereas if you have this big brand and this large following, I might attract people that are not so resourceful, and I have to filter through each person to figure out like who's being more resourceful, who's not being resourceful. But so I found that that's really helped me actually with client success. Like weirdly enough, having a smaller following of just very, very focused copywriters actually brought me, some really great clients I've had the opportunity of working with. So I like that. And I think that makes sense because that's very much what I've seen to work for the clients I've helped, to make 6 figures from copywriting is they take action. We have roadblocks. Sometimes they're emotional roadblocks. Some of these clients, they're maybe just don't have the skill yet. And then you just deal with it as it comes. And then you just keep taking action. Because for me, there's a lot of things I've struggled with, that I've had to grow through and become the person I am today in order to, let's say, for example, be on camera. Like I wasn't particularly a big fan of being on camera 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think I actually sat and ever really dug deep into some core emotion, as some of the mindset guys would say. Is like, I didn't do that. I just got on camera for over 100 hours. Like, eventually, I had obviously emotional resistance along the way, but I just kind of pushed through it. And sometimes I would get support to push through it, and sometimes I just pushed through it by myself until there was enough of a habit and until there was enough of a comfort and familiarity with being on camera that I just was able to do it. And so, for me, because I'm not a performance coach and I'm more of a copywriting results coach, I would just spend a lot of time telling my clients, like, look, we can dig into this, we can get into the emotional challenge, we can go into the limiting beliefs or the mindset, but I think the most powerful thing we can do right now is just take the action of somebody that makes $100,000 a year, deal with things as they come, and a lot of the stuff actually will just kind of fade away. Maybe you'll still have some of those challenges, but for your whole life you might have some of those challenges. I still, my point was, even though now I'm more comfortable on video, let's say I do a public speech in front of 1,000 people or something, I'm probably going to have the exact same challenges emotionally that I had when I got on video for the first time, until I become more comfortable with it. Or if I'm in front of a lot of people that are very, very successful that I don't feel like I'm on that level, I might feel that same emotion. So I didn't rip it out at the roots. I don't believe that you actually ever really rip it out completely. I believe it's more of like just deal with it as it comes. I'm curious to know your perspective on removing or dealing with these things deep down. Because, some coaches will try and say, let's sit and remove all this stuff so that you can perform. And I'm just like, well, I don't know. I can remove a little bit, but I'm just going to keep taking action until I get used to it.
Look, if you think that just always working on mindset is the answer, it's just turtles all the way down. You're just going to find new problems. Like if you just focus on it that way. But I think we have to be careful in that people just need different things. People need different things. Some people are going to need more of this emotional, let's say, valve release. And some people have had these experiences that are clouding their ability right now. I have had people come to me and they said, I've got this issue with money. And we did delve deeper into their childhood, and then they end up having massive revenue months, following that situation. But then other people have come to me and I've said, you don't have a money mindset problem. You have a skill issue. You have a lack of education when it comes to understanding how to make what you need to be doing to be making that kind of money. So I think the important thing is we need to meet people at the level that they're at. And there's some people that can just take action and they can just do what you're saying. And their approach will be, well, yeah, I'll just do 100 hours of video until I'm more comfortable and I'll just push through it.
Mm.
And some other people just need more emotional work. And some people actually have these deeper frictions that are getting in the way. Now, does that mean they won't run into other hurdles and obstacles at the next level and the level after that? And of course they will. But a part of what I hope to do with people, and I think this is very in line with you, because this is probably one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of your approach as well, is I'm very principles focused. I'm not just like when I'm working with people, I'm not just trying to address the immediate problem. I'm trying to give them a way of understanding at a principle level how to approach these things and how to approach themselves so that in the future they know how to be able to address these things. So, I mean, if you imagine there's a bell curve like this, right? And on one end, you have people who are just like, you should be in therapy, or you should just work on your feelings and your emotions and all this. They're at the one extreme. And then the other extreme is the willpower people who are just like, you just take action, self-development, just push, just do work, take action. Yeah, okay. So there's this bell curve. Well, people generally are somewhere amongst that bell curve. And if you're any good, if you're worth your salt as a coach, what you're good at and what you should be able to like decipher for the individual in front of you is where on that curve are they and what do they need.
I like that. Yeah,
that's my
sense.
job.
I like that. I think you're right. There's definitely some people that, well, maybe it's also like on a case by case, like depends on what the thing is that they're working through, right? Because maybe in like getting on video for me is something that I can just push through by putting more hours in. But that's because previously when I first started posting on social media, I actually did, work through some emotional stuff for a significant period of time up front. And that was necessary. And I think the biggest frame was for me, and maybe this is something that if you're watching this and you struggle to, get out there and become somebody relevant in your copywriting industry or to the people that you're targeting and you want to talk to, maybe this is something that you felt, is that I felt I didn't have anything of value to say, and it was all about me. And I was posting to just for the sake of getting attention, and felt cringy. It felt like, oh, I have nothing really to say to people. Why would they really have anything to listen to me? It's selfish. And I had a really good coach that kind of walked me through this, not very long process, just 2 or 3 calls, and just helped me reframe in my mind that it wasn't really about me. It was actually about all these things I could do for others that people would appreciate. And I began to see it that way. I started to focus on the people I was talking to and not really focus on myself. And it was a small shift, but I really did need that coach to help me see that perspective. And then I began to post. And then I got that confirmation when a few people sent me messages that were very thoughtful, like, oh, thank you so much for sharing this. It really helped me. I felt a lot better. It's motivated me. And then from there, I was able to really pick up, and now I don't have that much friction. But so I see what you're saying as well. It's like different people are at different places, and it's about, this is why this is the value of one-on-one coaching. Like, you just don't get this if you're in a video course. You know what I mean? Like, some people that want to get to the next level and they're trying to figure it all out themselves, you just can't see what you can't see. And sometimes it's having that person one-on-one that's just got the experience. It makes a world of a difference.
Absolutely. And I'm sure, like, being a high caliber coach yourself with the people you work through, a part of your ability to help those people get to that level financially in their copywriting careers is because you're able to pick up on the uniqueness of them. It's like with jiu-jitsu, which I love. It's one of my obsessions, as it's become more popular with entrepreneurs in general. But like, you learn that different people have different game plans. You learn that different submissions and different styles of jiu-jitsu work for different people. If I see someone with long limbs, I generally see that they're probably somebody that does a lot of triangles and stuff. If I see a shorter guy, a more stocky guy like myself, they're probably doing more like chokes and stuff. So a really good coach and a really good mentor that's there to sort of assist you in bringing out the best in you, their job isn't necessarily to give you the information, because the information is widely available. It's to set that information up in a structure that makes sense to who you are, to your strengths, to your uniqueness, to what qualities you need. And I'm a big proponent of that, because one thing that I do see a lot is copywriters come in to me and they work with me. And one of the biggest barriers they have is thinking that the way they should be productive, or the volume of work they should be doing, or how they approach getting up in the morning has to be like somebody else that they follow, and then they like guilt and shame themselves for not being Alex Hormozy. And the reality is, like, people have different rhythms and patterns, times of days that they perform best, and all these things. And it's not about you trying to stuff yourself into being like David Goggins or Alex Hormozy. It's you finding the right alignment for who you are. I don't get up at 4 a.m. I still get shit done. You know,
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not
yeah.
a very meticulous routine person, in the sense of I like to party, I do my jiu-jitsu, I like to be social. I live a pretty chaotic life, but I get things done
Mm-hmm.
because I work to my patterns. I work to my strengths. I know what works for me. I know when it works for me. I know how to utilize that to my advantage. I know that I'm much stronger on video than I am at written word, you know, and I would take advantage of that. I know that I've got very good people skills, so that I can leverage that. In fact, that's mostly how I've been able to get clients of such a high caliber even early on in my career, because I'm a good people person. So playing to your strengths, playing to your unique qualities, playing to what you actually need on a mindset level.
I like that. Yeah, that's a big thing. I think holds. I mean, entrepreneurs back in general, but particularly copywriters, because a lot of copywriters think that, to get clients. I mean, let's just talk about clients for a second. It's like, to get clients, I have to send 1,000 emails. And it's like, okay, but you're good at events and you live in America. So you're comparing yourself to the person that sent 2,000 emails when you could just go to an event next door, pay $700, and you're really good at networking. You could have 2 clients. Like, why don't you just go do that? Oh, that's a great idea. It's like, well,
You're
this is
preaching
the
to the
kind of thing
choir.
this is the kind of thing that I find so, I find it entertaining, because I've had a lot of good clients. So to me, it's funny to see a lot of coaches preach that this is the strategy to get clients, or that is the strategy to get clients. And it's like, that is your strategy to get clients, and it worked for you. And to expect that every single person that you coach is going to perform at the same level with your strategy as you did is a little inexperienced, really. I think it's just very inexperienced to think that people will be able to do what you did. I mean, the way I've built my own freelance business, I don't think that my client getting strategy, anybody I've ever coached, has used quite the way I did it. And I never expect them to, because it's like, well, why would it work for you? Because the way I work is a little different. But, for you, or whoever I'm talking to, you have a slightly different play style. You have a slightly different strength. You have a slightly different style of even copywriting. So like, even the type of clients that you would want to go for wouldn't be the same as my clients. And those types of clients, let's have a look at them. They don't work the same way as my clients. Therefore, my strategy might not be as effective.
Yeah, and this again is why having the sort of same thinking process as I imagine you do as well is important, because we got to return to first principles. The problem is we get into like the minutia of being in the online marketing space, and we're not safeguarded against marketing messages. But like, we're actually getting more marketing messages than anyone, because we're getting what everyone else in the general populace is getting, and then we're getting even more because we're in it 24/7, and we're not safeguarded against those messages getting in, right? So then you hear all the bullshit. You hear email's dead. Oh, this doesn't work. Oh, you've got to do this. You got to do that. All this crap, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And people get caught in the minutia of it. They get caught in this surface level bullshit of, you should be doing it. This works, but this doesn't work. That works, but that doesn't work. This worked, but it doesn't work anymore. And this is what you should be doing. And the problem there is, you can find a path that works for you if you just return to first principles.
yeah, yeah.
What are the
I'm
first
with you.
principles?
100%.
Like, what are the first principles? What is it that cold outreach does? What is it that we're actually doing there? We're getting the attention of potential buyers, and we need an avenue to do that. if I can find a way that allows me to get the attention of potential buyers, whatever approach I apply can be effective, because that is the root goal of the thing. It's got nothing to do with it being email or whatever else. Those are just vehicles. The vehicles is just a way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody gets so stuck on this top level thing that they're not actually asking the questions of what's the function, what's the purpose, what is the reason, what am I actually trying to aim to do? And once you get clear about that, you can find ways to do these things that nobody else is even considering.
I actually think that's part of why I had a really good start as a copywriter. Is I mean, I obviously consumed a lot of marketing material from one or two gurus that I was particularly following, but most of the time I was just winging it. I was just sort of doing what felt like the best way forward. And I think by doing that, I actually had less exposure to all these different boxes that everybody likes to put people into. So, the other copywriters, my peers, would say like, oh, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said that, so-and-so said this, so-and-so said try this. I wasn't really consuming any of that content. I was just kind of trying to solve it from a base. Like, I've never done this before. Let's say I've never written an email before. I had no email coaching or any email program. I just looked at some of the best email marketers online and I said, what are they doing? Kind of like just digested it from there. Whereas a lot of people would say, no, the best way to get started as an email copywriter is to go through this course. And it's like, this is just this guy's perspective on how to do it, And there might be a lot of really good principles, but, just looking at email copywriting as it was, just looking at good marketers, I kind of internalized it the way I saw it. And it made it a lot easier to get started without having all these little rules and you should do this and you shouldn't do this. Because I think a lot of beginner copywriters, they do that. I mean, number one question beginners usually ask me is, what's the best fill in the blank? What's the best way to get clients? What's the best way to send a cold email? What's the best type of ad to write? It's always this like ultimate number one thing you have to do. And it's like, I don't know. When you find out, let me know. When you find out what the best way is, please let me know, because I'm still looking for it. I think it just depends on who you are, So.
Yeah, and to take it even further, that question of what's the best usually is a mask for what's going to get me the result without having to face the fears, the challenges, etc. Like, that's really what that is, that question. And the thing is, I was thinking about this recently, again, because I want to help people sort of reframe things. I've been thinking about something I'm working more on right now is cold outreach. I've always been good at relationship building, but that takes time. And there's this sort of gap between being somebody that just reaches out the first second and goes, hey, do you want what I want? Do you want this thing? I've got this thing. Hey. And also the other side of that being, I've had this relationship with you for 6 months, a year, and you still haven't become a client. And those are sort of the two ends of the spectrum. It's like, well, how do you sort of shorten that gap? How do you make it smaller? And the process of figuring that out leads to a lot of failure. And then people be like, if somebody was in my shoes doing the same process, they'd be chasing that product or service that's like, you'll get 10 clients tomorrow, this works, do it now, this is going to get you there straight away. Whereas I'm thinking of it like, I don't want that. I don't want that. I'll tell you why I don't want that. Because if I get good at the skill of cold outreach and it becomes a part of who I am, it becomes a part of my character because I've developed it through the trials and tribulations. In terms of the long game, that just adds another force multiplier to what guarantees that in the future, whether AI is around, the market changes, people don't need mindset coaches anymore, whatever happens on the surface, I'm still going to thrive.
I like that, yeah. How do you... Okay, so if I'm... Okay, let's say I'm watching this right now and I'm saying, okay, that makes sense. I need to really, focus on my strengths and I need to lean into the stuff. Maybe, you said you're leaning more into cold outreach now. Maybe they say I need to lean into networking or whatever they feel like they need to do. How would you self-diagnose maybe some of your own strengths and like how to lean into stuff? Because not everybody wants to like initially invest thousands of dollars. I mean, people invest thousands of dollars to work with me up front, but I managed to maybe it was intuitively, I found a couple of my strengths maybe over time. I think a lot of people can actually just objectively look at themselves and say like, okay, here's what I'm a little bit better at, and they just need to spend more time doing that instead of consuming content. How would you recommend somebody go about getting that process moving, where they know they're leaning into themselves a bit more?
Yeah. Okay. So there's one thing that kind of is the easiest way to answer that, which is look at the things that you take for granted that other people probably compliment you on or turn to you for advice on, because generally people don't realize those are strengths because they come so easy to them. So take them for
Right.
granted. The other thing is sometimes what will happen is people won't realize that their talent is actually a point of leverage because they're so fixated on some other thing, some other path or some other thing. Let's say we got a copywriter who's doing reels for their own content and they're really good at it for whatever reason. But they get this fixation on, no, but I want to be a copywriter. So they're taking for granted the fact that they have this talent or skill because maybe they're comparing themselves to someone else, whatever it might be. The self-diagnosis part is a little bit tricky. I mean, I can pretty much have someone on a call and in the first 5, maybe 10 minutes, be pretty accurate with what their strengths, weaknesses are and sort of a profile beyond just their Myers-Briggs or something like that, like deeper than that. Doing it to themselves is a little bit trickier because there's so many judgments and comparisons to peers that then leave them blind to seeing what their strengths are. So the first thing is opening yourself up to the idea that there's more than one avenue of like how things can be done, or that if you're not good at writing a particular style, that doesn't have to stop you from being really successful. This kind of makes me want to talk about this other idea, because in the entrepreneurial space, you hear all the time, you should pursue your passion. And I'm like, I don't know if that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay. I think what you should do is pursue your talent.
Yeah, I like that. I agree.
The reason is because your talent is something that you're good at easily and that likely somebody else values. And if you look at Joe Rogan, his passion is comedy. He didn't make his fortune doing comedy. He's not even that great of a comedian, to be fair. But he was able to leverage his talent, which was interviewing people. And I think we can get so idealistic and caught in this idea, I've got to do this thing that I'm passionate about, I've got to do this thing I'm passionate about, when sometimes you should be thinking, maybe I should just do the thing I'm talented at, because that's actually a much easier road for you. And you can then leverage that to do your passion.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that like, kind of openness of thought.
I was going to just say that when you follow your talent and you make $10,000 or $20,000, you start to make it a bit of a passion, don't you? it's like, oh, you're really good at this, and you just had like 20 grand land in your bank account. It's like, I kind of like this now, but more than I thought. That's how I felt about copywriting the first time. I was like, oh, I'm not so. I mean, I like languages. It became something I got into in my late teens. I started to like languages and communication a lot more, and then I started making money with copywriting. That's when I actually started to really. It became a passion. I mean, entrepreneurship wasn't something that I'd never dreamed of being an entrepreneur as a kid. I wanted to be an astronaut, then I wanted to be a fireman, a firefighter, whatever you would call it. Then I wanted to be, I don't know, maybe like an explorer or something, or archaeologist. And everything was always about exploring. And so being an entrepreneur, business was never something that ever really appealed to me until I just wanted to travel the world. I just wanted to start making money from travel. So for a lot of people, you don't have to. Yeah, I agree with you. I don't think that passion is where it's at. And I'm a big believer in investing in coaching. Like the best 5 figures, it was about $12,000. The best $12,000 I ever invested was in a coach, a performance coach, that had a very, very similar conversation to the one we're having right now, but just very much applied to me, particularly my strengths and weaknesses, and and my opportunities. And that was the best $12,000 I ever spent. I didn't make any return compared to that on anything else, not on coaching programs, not on how to get client programs, not on how to write copy programs, everything about leaning into my strengths, understanding myself better, and like learning how to map my own terrain for what I want to do next, like which direction I'm going. That was the biggest shift. And to bring it back just 1 second, you mentioned like on it, some copywriter maybe is really good at Instagram reels. There's a great, case study of that, because I had a client a few years ago, maybe some of you watching actually know his name, Tyson, and his last name is 4D. Well, that's his YouTube channel. So Tyson 4D, he's very, very big today on YouTube. He's got over 150,000 subscribers. When I first started working with him, George, he was making, he had 2 clients or 3 clients, and he was working really, really hard. He was working 60 hours a week. But I always saw his content on YouTube, and I said to him, man, you're a good copywriter, but you're very good on camera. You're very good on camera, and you have a very good style. You need to double down on this brand, because you're a good writer, but imagine if you applied that to your own brand as well and double down. And he probably was already going to do it, but I just reinforced that for him and said, I think you have a lot of potential on camera to build a real brand. Now he's a 7-figure, coach. Now, he's a good copywriter, but he's also a coach now. And I just wonder, some people might say, oh yeah, you're really, really good. You should just work with better and better clients. It's like force them down this road. You have to just be a copywriter. It's like, no, the guy's clearly a very talented speaker and coach. Like, you don't have to be rigid and force yourself to be a copywriter if your talents take you slightly different direction, So.
Yeah, that's again a question of understanding what it is that you want. Like, what is it that you really want out of all of this in terms of financially, in terms of why you're going down this path, and not getting too caught up in the hype of it, because there might be a different path for you. There might be a different way of leveraging your strengths, and that's not to put anyone off. And as far as copywriting goes, just sort of reiterating what you said in terms of investing in a coach, and you said performance coach, but even with copy, like if you're around people long enough in this space, you see patterns. And one thing I can say is almost every high-level copywriter that's successful was somebody who worked underneath someone else for a long time, probably for free, doing really a lot of work to kind of get that classical medieval kind of mentorship thing. Those people, those copywriters, from what I've seen, they're the ones that end up doing extremely well, where they go and they go into the fire, they go into the grind, they do these internships that are probably extremely difficult and extremely, require a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of for very little immediate return. But those are the ones that, if you really look around, are usually the ones that are thriving.
Yeah, that's the case most of the time. For the clients I've worked with too, they came from agencies that worked them to the bone, or they had a mentor that really pushed them to their next level. I was in an in-house role with an 8-figure business. That's where I got my foundation training directly from like a guru, I guess you could say, guru coach. Got a lot of work. I did a lot of work for him, 16 hours a day for a year and a half. I was pretty burnt out, but after that, I just knew the game. I just knew how to do it. So I think a lot of people are sitting there wondering, how do I get good at copywriting? And I'm struggling and not so talented. All these other people that are so much better. It's like, well, many of the ones that you look up to just were thrown into a very intense environment for a very long time. They're just really effective because they just did it for so long. I mean, if you want to get that good, write 10 emails a day for a year and a half. Simple, and it's like most people aren't going to do that because they're not getting paid or they're not being pushed. Or, I mean, I'm not I'm not disciplined. I'm not super disciplined. I just was forced because I didn't want to lose my client. so I just got good over a year and a half. But if I was left to my own devices, I would have never done any of that stuff because I just didn't have the direction, didn't have the pressure. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, like, ask yourself what you're actually prepared to do, because um, it's not just being thrown in the fire. It's being willing to go into the fire. It's somebody posting on social media, some big copywriter posting that they're looking for an intern, and it might require you to fly the other side of the world to work with them, and it could be a risk, and they could take advantage of you and stuff like that. But like, do you have the willingness to take that risk, to make this happen, to make this path? Because one thing that I'm like, one thing that blows my mind with copywriters, because I hear, there's so much exposure to. I think the word copywriter is terrible positioning in general. Okay, because the problem with the term copywriter is it's now a commodity, and then you do have to fear, like, you do have to fear AI and other stuff if you're positioned as a commodity, because that's how commodity markets work. You look for the best deal, and you go after the best deal. And the problem with copywriters is they treat themselves like a commodity, and then they go out into this market that is saturated with people doing the same thing as them, and then wonder why they're struggling to get clients and stuff. And it's at the point now where, and I'm sure this is probably something that you've talked to your students about. Like, this is where you do need to build a personal brand, and you do need to be uniquely positioned in the market. And why it blows my mind is because copywriters do this kind of thing for every other person's offer and service, but they can't do it for themselves. And if you can't do it for yourself, you're almost disproving that you're good at what you do in the first place.
Yeah.
Why aren't you applying that? Why aren't you applying that same idea that you need a unique mechanism, that you need to be positioned uniquely? Of course, you're going to fear AI and all these other things, taking your job, because you're positioned like a commodity and you're thinking like a commodity.
It's interesting because I've thought about this as well. Why are so many copywriters not building themselves a brand? Is it because they, copywriters in general don't want to get out there, or is it because of this reason or that reason? I think there's obviously a few different things, and it depends on the person. But one thing I have noticed for sure is that there, at least as of this interview, the time we're talking today, I don't think many coaches are preaching this message, like the typical copy coaches. I think that's a big part of it because, well, first of all, it doesn't sell very nicely to tell people that you have to go and put yourself out there. So I don't know if people like that message from that perspective. But the other thing is, I think people do. They look at coaches, like especially copywriters, they're looking at coaches as people that tell them how to live and how to be and what good copywriters look like. And when you are constantly looking at everybody else's information, especially gurus, that gurus make money when you need them, not when you don't need them. So as long as you need them, then they're going to make money. Then they're not going to tell you about the personal brand, because you're going to just have to keep buying their course, buy their next secret, buy their next training, buy their next program. But but building a personal brand is actually the next step. I like that you bring it up because I've had quite a few different people I've interviewed from very different, places with different expertise, and everybody keeps echoing this. It's like, don't be a commodity. You're not just a copywriter. You need to build a personal brand, and this is the way that you're going to stand out. Do you think it's even? I mean, you've worked with a lot of copywriters. You've seen the dark side, of what this industry is like, and you've seen it with a lot of different people. Do you think it's? I'm genuinely curious. Do you think that this is a industry that is worthwhile pursuing to try, make your dent and create a six-figure income for yourself? Do you think it's really worth all of the, everything that you see?
Yeah, I think it's worth it, but I also think, like, you have to be really vigilant to the space, because there are a lot of people that are not operate in particular self-interested ways, and we're all kind of self-interested, and greed does play a huge part in this. And my perspective take on this as well is like a part of marketing effectively is all of us basically creating anxiety and fear and creating new problems to make money, right? Like, and then we make it out like we create those problems and that we create this new anxiety fear problem, and then we use it to then be the savior to then make money so that we can have money so that we can live the lifestyle that we become accustomed to. And I'm not saying that some good doesn't come out of that, but there's a lot of bullshit that you'll see day to day on your Facebook feed, because that's how marketing is. I don't know that that's something we can ever escape. But I will say this. It is not an easier path, and it's not a path that guarantees you that you don't fall into your own rat race if you're not careful.
Yeah. I think a lot of copywriters make less money than people in jobs. So I'm just gonna say, I mean, I've worked with a lot of copywriters that have a very unpleasant financial situation compared to people who decided to go the traditional route. And obviously that's not a convenient thing for a guru to say, because they're going to get less sales, but it's the reality, So yeah, if you're willing to, copywriting, I suppose, like every type of entrepreneurship is just I wouldn't even say copywriting as a business. It's more of a skill, but people do treat it as a business. But let's just say as a freelancer, you're exposed, your weaknesses weaknesses like opportunities, everything that gets in your way of growth as a person is going to be more amplified, because in a 9-to-5, I think you can hide behind the role a little bit more easily in many 9-to-5s. Whereas in freelancing or even in business, you're facing your weaknesses constantly. Like my number one problem was I didn't want to get on camera, and I eventually had to face it. I eventually had to face the fact that I didn't want to get on camera, and I kept feeling it because my business kept hitting this plateau. People wouldn't have as much trust for me because they never saw my face. And I realized, okay, I got to fix that. And so then you eventually have to face that fear. So in marketing and copywriting, you do have to face your fears. So I think I personally think that's an opportunity for people. Like, besides the income aspect, it's like it forces you to grow as a person. But yeah, I want to go back to this whether or not it's actually worth getting into this industry. What do you think somebody who's looking to really take this as their career and like really wants to do this, they really like the aspect of being able to live anywhere they want, work with clients online, maybe work with multiple clients, have more control over their life than a traditional 9-to-5. What are some of the things that they're going to have to face in this industry that they might not want to be facing, but they're actually probably going to have to face?
Copywriters specifically, or like entrepreneurs, or just
I think mostly copywriters, but I'm sure that there's some overlaps.
For sure. Let me preface this. I'm going to say something about understanding what the word passion means, because we talked about it earlier and probably should have touched on it then, but didn't. The root meaning of passion is to endure. That's what the word means. That's what its etymology is. It's to endure. That's why it's called Passion of the Christ. And that's such an important thing to understand, because if you're really passionate about doing this, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It actually means it's probably going to be hard. And the question is, do you really want it? Because it actually is harder. It's a lot harder. And there might be times where you're not sure if you're going to have money to keep your lights on. And you're going to have to ask yourself whether or not you need to go get a job. And you're going to have a partner that's going to challenge you. And a myriad of things are going to happen. So I just wanted to kind of preface it with that. But this is the one thing I want to say specifically for copywriters. You have to understand that you're in a service-based business and you cannot rely on other human beings for your income. Like, that is core number one thing, right? You cannot rely on the retainer client as a guarantee of you maintaining the quality of life that you have, no matter how good your work is, because that is a variable. That is a human and they're unpredictable, and there are so many reasons why they might drop you, why they might need to, so if you approach this thing from, I'm going to get this client and then I'm going to like lean on that client as salvation for the life that I want to have, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. You're going to be in these constant feast and famine cycles. You're going to be in this constant anxiety of, is my work good enough? Am I going to get fired? You're going to end up in these situations where scope creep is going to come in and you're not going to be willing to set boundaries or communicate efficiently. So then you're going to be in situations where maybe you think you have a problem client, but it's not actually a problem client. It's just that you haven't communicated with them and all of these other things. And as long as you're in a service-based business, you cannot be dependent on any one client for your income. That is like the first thing for copywriters. The second thing is, you can't just upskill forever to get to the top echelons. That's not going to get you there. It's not going to get you there. There's a confusion here between wanting to be the best copywriter and wanting to make the most money as a copywriter. Those are not the same things. You can be incredible craftsmen that make like so good at your copy. You know, every other copywriter looks at you, you know, like a comedian's comedian. Does not mean that you're making the most money.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to decide what it is that you really want. Do you want to make a lot of money doing something that you're quite good at and that you get good results for other people? Or do you want to be the best at copywriting? Because a lot of the approach to trying to solve this matter of making more money and having a successful, sustainable copywriting career, let's say, seems to be, oh, I'll just keep buying every program and every course and every community, and there'll be a secret hidden somewhere in the crevices of the that is going to get me there. It's not. It's not.
Yeah,
it's absolutely not.
That's true. It's true. I think that I started making more money when I started becoming more well-known than when I started becoming better. I was probably my best at writing copy a few years ago when I was in that in-house gig, because it was all I was doing all day, every day. I didn't have any other clients, didn't have any other priorities. I just wrote copy all day. So I was the sharpest and the most fit in terms of output back then. And yet I make 10 times more today than I did back then, because now I'm more well-known. I have relationships with people. So I'm not the best copywriter, and I don't have a plan to be the best copywriter, but I would like to be one of the most well-known copywriters. And I think for people watching this, that's probably a better path. In fact, maybe it's even a better path to not even long-term be known as a copywriter. A lot of copywriters I work with that are six-figure copywriters, they're actually growth marketers or email experts or front-end. There's something. They're not necessarily just copywriters, you know? So there's also that rebrand that you're not just another copywriter, you're so-and-so, you're George, you're Matthew, you're someone. But I do like that. That makes a lot of sense, because I've seen that too. I've seen that with my clients. Like a lot of copywriters, they want to just upskill. And when they stop learning stuff, they come to me and they say, you know, I want to learn this next thing. So what do you have to learn it for? Are you currently doing that for a client? No, but I don't want AI to take over. It's like, well, learning something doesn't necessarily prevent AI from getting better. So it's something else that you got to focus on. It's not just about learning more stuff, you know? So.
Yeah. It's a full circle process, like with jiu-jitsu as well. Like when you're a white belt, you learn everything. When you're a blue belt, you start kind of refining all the things that you've learned. By the time you're a purple belt, you start getting pickier about what things actually work for you and which things are worth keeping. And then by the time you get to brown belt, you've refined those. And if we look at someone like one of the goats of jiu-jitsu, Roger Gracie, he will say to you, he uses about 11 moves, but he beats everyone with those 11 moves. So like, you can't just keep adding on and thinking that that's somehow going to take you further. And the other part of that is, whether you were a freelancer or whatever, I don't care who you are. If you're an entrepreneur, you own a business, you have to run it like a business. You have to consider what your next month's projections are. You have to know your numbers. You have to get a certain level of good at knowing how to pitch and sell yourself. You need to know marketing. Like, you need to know everything. You can't just be the copy person. But the leverage is that copy itself is a force multiplier. It's a powerful thing. Like, I know I have gotten a lot better at copy because I had no choice. Because if I wanted to be really good at helping people with mindset and performance, being really good at helping them with mindset and performance is not enough. I have to be good at sales. I have to be good at copy. I have to be good at marketing. I have to wear all those hats until I can pass them on to somebody else. And even if I were to pass them on to somebody else, I would have to have a decent understanding of them to know who to look for and to make sure that they're doing it in a way that's beneficial to the growth of my business. And there's too many people who are wondering why they're not making the big bucks and why they can't make this work, when all they're really doing is changing the word employee for freelancer. But they're acting like an employee. So they're getting treated like an employee. They're treating themselves like an employee, and they're not growing. And employees generally don't grow. And the reason they don't grow is because there's a fixed term between what they're expected to do and the amount of money they'll get every week or month or whatever the agreement is. And then that agreement is then revised over time when somebody goes, hey, look, I wouldn't, could we look at a promotion? Could I look at getting a promotion now? And that's kind of the fixed idea of being an employee. And if you act like an employee as a freelancer, as a copywriter, as whatever, then you shouldn't be surprised that you're not doing as well as you want to be doing, because I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you're a business owner. And you have a certain level of obligation to treat your business like an entity. So businesses are entities. They're called entities. And the reason they're called entities is because they're treated as if they are organic, living organisms. They're treated like organisms, which is why you can have a business entity and it can get sued and it doesn't affect you necessarily. The business itself can get sued as an entity. So if it's an entity, that means you need to nurture it and feed it and take responsibility for it and provide for it and attend to it. It's not just something that's a means to an end. You have an obligation.
That's a perspective shift for me, because for a while I did used to see copywriting as a business, and then I started to call it a skill because I felt that people were treating copywriting as this business model that you can take to millions of dollars, because that's how it was being promoted online. It's like this get rich opportunity, and it's copywriting, and it's like you can maybe get to 25K a month as just working by yourself with an assistant, maybe one junior copywriter, but this is not something that can take you to millions of dollars just by itself as a skill. And so I started to call copywriting a skill because of that, because I didn't like that everybody treated it as this opportunity to make money. There's like, oh, you can become a millionaire. But from what you're saying, I actually might go back to the previous perspective I had about copywriting being a business, but not because you get rich quick, but because you're right. It's something that you have to take care of. Like, I have an invoicing system, I have an accountant, I have cash projections. I know exactly how much I should be making, assuming all the deals stay. I also know which deals have like a less lifetime value, where deal might actually end. I mean, this month actually a client eventually, they're actually no longer selling the offer that they had before, so they no longer need my services for that business. So that actually a client dropped off this month, but I actually was expecting that about 3 months ago. So it's not a shock to me. Whereas I think if some people just treat this as a skill and don't see it as a business, that might have been a very scary moment for them, where they're like, oh, suddenly that money that I thought was so stable is gone. What am I going to do? So yeah, I think that's good. So maybe my new perspective on this is that copywriting is a business, but it's a business model that caps. And if you want to take it beyond 25K, you have to really build a business model that serves a business and more than just I'll provide you some copy. but you got to see this as a business. Otherwise you're going to have a real hard time, because a lot of copywriters do just rely on one client, and then they come to me after they lose that client, and then they want help, and I say, no, you need to come to me when things are good, because sales cycle takes you 3 to 6 months sometimes to close a new client. It's not something I can, it doesn't matter how good of a coach I am, it's like I could tell you the best strategy in the world. It might take you 3 months to close somebody, because the business owner might not be ready. It might take 3 months. So you lose a client, and then you want to come work with me, or maybe with you, George. And it's like, well, I wish you'd come to me 3 months ago so you could have started the sales cycle, because now you're going to have 3 months where you might not have any income. And that's a very unpleasant place to be. And it's going to, all kinds of nasty experiences are going to come up and, challenge whether or not you should be doing this. But, if you treated this as a business, maybe 3 months ago, then you might not have put yourself into the situation in the first place. And that has nothing to do with mindset. That just has to do with business acumen. Just has to do with knowing that, it's not a job.
Yeah, it's not a job. It's a business. You're an entrepreneur. You might be a solopreneur, but you're a business, and you have to operate like a business. And if you don't operate like a business, then this kind of comes back to the problem that, and this is kind of what separates the elite from the kind of average. The difference between looking at goals linearly versus cyclically. Got that word out? Barely. Because athletes don't treat improvement like a linear process, right? Like anyone at the highest level does not treat development as something that is linear. They treat it in cycles. So an athlete will go, I'm going to work on my strength for the next 8 weeks. They'll do a cycle of strength, and then 8 weeks maybe is on another component, conditioning. And they'll do these cycles, and they're relative to whatever their aims are. But the reason that they do these cycles and they work in cycles is because there isn't an end point. There isn't some fixed linear finish line. They know that this is something that will continue for the next 5, 10, 15 years of their life. So it's a lot less of this fixation or this idea of how do I get the next client? How do I get 10K this month? Because this is the other thing I've seen. Somebody will get to 10K, and in all fairness, I've been this person myself. You get to 10K and then you're fixated on getting to 20K, but you haven't proven that you can sustain 10K for even more than 1 month. So how do you even know that you can maintain that level yet? But you're already fixated on trying to go even higher. You need to show that you can maintain a certain level and then grow to the next level and so forth and so on. Otherwise, what you could, sure, next month you could make 30K, maybe. And then guess what? The month after that, you're making 5K. And the month after that, you're back at nothing. And then the next month, you're back at 5K. And then you're wondering how come you can't stay at 30K. And it's because you're not treating the way you're approaching your business like it's something that is going to continue for the next 5, 10 years. You're treating it like this linear goal of the next client, this month's income, whatever it might be.
Very short term, yeah.
Very short term. And if you maintain that short term thinking, you can't win. You can't. And that's something that I really admire with you, because what I noticed with you recently, I think it was maybe 6 months ago, because you've been around for a long time, you've been building your brand, you've been building your reputation, everything like that. But then there was this sort of onslaught from you. You started putting out all these videos, you did the Basecamp thing, you're starting to promote all your students and all this stuff, and you went balls to the wall. But you had done that because you had been running the race for a long time, pacing yourself and building the momentum and building the sustainability, because you think about these things in terms of a long game. You're thinking about it in terms of a long-term process of being in this for a long time, not being in the rush for just that next accolade, that
Yeah.
next milestone. But and that allowed you to then get to a point of this exponential growth, where then you were able to just flood things, and it obviously just took off like crazy. But most people don't have that line of thinking. They're thinking way too short term, and some of that short term thinking is the urgency and need to, like, I need money to keep my lights on kind of thing. And some of it is just not really taking the responsibility and the proper attitude of treating what they're doing like a real business. And I was in that for a long time myself, so I'm not like judging anyone for it.
When I first hit 10K, my priority was to just stay at 10K. I didn't care about 20K. My goal's been to make millions. It's always been to make a lot of money. Like ever since I discovered I had a skill in business that I could use. Once I discovered entrepreneurship as like a real vehicle for me, and I liked business, I always wanted to make millions. But my thought process has often been, let me lock in what is working right now, because opportunity is going to show up, and I'll be able to take the opportunity when it shows up, but I won't have to drop anything that's already working. So it'll just compound onto what's already working instead of dropping what I'm already doing. Because I see this with so many businesses, like not just copywriters. In fact, it's even worse with a lot of the gurus that launch products and scale very quickly. It's even more volatile than copywriters. It's like they'll build a business to, let's say, $1 million a year, and now they're busy talking about strategies to get to $10 million a year at the expense of the strategies that got them to 7 figures. And I have to say to them, listen, I get that you want to get to this next level, but you're not doing the things that got you to this level anymore, and you're only doing the things that get you to the next level. You're going to just fall completely flat, because you need both. You need to be, let's say, you need to deliver the client success and get the testimonials and create continuous success in order to be able to scale. But you're only scaling now. You're not focusing on client success anymore. So eventually that's going to hurt you. Maybe for the next 6 months you can get away with it, but eventually the negative reviews online are going to pile up, and eventually you're going to get forced out of business because you have so many negative reviews. And I've seen a few people that ended up happening. It's that they just kept pushing away the stuff that they did in the early days. They did get good client success. Their first 100 students were great. They just reused those same testimonials again and again and again. And these are really, really smart business owners that became known as like scammy gurus. And it's like, they actually weren't scammy gurus. At one point, they were very good coaches that had a lot of good clients. They just got distracted with, I often say that there's a lot of people are a little upset with gurus and scams online. And it's like, there's a very fine line between incompetence and malice. And most of the time it's just incompetent people, like it's just a bit of, they grow so big that it's beyond them to deal with customer success at the scale that they're at. And they're not willing to compromise their income or their revenue to go back and fix the real problem, which is that their customers are no longer getting the service that they need at the price that they paid, So, but just to go back real quick, because I think a lot of people might find this useful, this concept of like building upon your base. It's like when you hit 3K a month, if you come work with me, I'm curious to know what you would suggest, but I think maybe it's similar. It's like I would tell them, okay, well, what can you do to stay at 3K next month? Make sure you absolutely hit 3K again. And then like make sure you keep hitting 3K. And maybe it's only a couple of extra things. Maybe it's the same stuff that you're already doing. You work through that within the first 1 or 2 weeks we're working together. Cool. We've locked in that level. We've done what we need to do to make sure you stay at that level. Now we can start talking about how you can get to 5K. Okay, when you get to 5K, how can we lock that in? Okay, get to 5K, how can we get to 10K? And you just keep compounding, you just keep locking it in. Whereas the people that just scale like this, you're eventually going to go down. That's just reality. The more you go up, eventually you're going to go down. So how do we make sure that when you do go down, you stabilize somewhere, you create stability, and then you can build from there again.
Yeah, the thing is, like, if you hit 3K or 5K because you've got to retain a client that you have for the next 6 months or whatever, that's not indicative of your ability to hit 3K or 5K, because it's dependent on this external thing, right? And it's kind of this thing of coming back to the idea of Are you the person that your goal, financial or otherwise, was made for? Because I can tell you right now that, and I have done this, I've had Facebook groups and I deleted everyone in them and started totally fresh. I've rebranded myself before. You could throw me anywhere in the world and I can probably get a sale and get clients because I've developed and cultivated those qualities within myself. But when you go, I'm going to get 3K this month, I'm going to go 6K next month, I'm going to go 10K the month after, and you're on this sort of speeding trajectory upwards, that's great. But if it's not because of the quality of your actions, but it's the result of just you sort of becoming dependent on clients and just sort of getting more clients and pushing yourself as hard as you can to get those clients, you will hit a wall. You will hit a wall because you haven't developed your capacity. It's the same with weight training. You know, I might be able to lift more weight if I push harder tomorrow, and I might be able to lift more weight if I push even harder the next day, and I can keep pushing harder, and maybe I'll lift even more weight for the next week. But then what's going to happen the week after?
Injuries.
Maybe I lose my motivation. Maybe I can't even do the working weight that I was doing a week before. Because whether it's copywriting or working out or whatever, you're still limited by the laws of thermodynamics. You still have a certain amount of energy that your system needs and that your nervous system can handle. And sometimes the gap isn't what you're capable of, it's just your capacity. And capacity can be built, but you need to build it over time. You know, it's even with outreach, for instance, you know, because there'll be some advice, you should do 100 a day, and some people can't do that. And it's like, if you can't do 100, start with where you're at. Do 10 every day and see if you can maintain that. Can you do 10 every day and then the next week like feel motivated to keep doing 10? If you can, that's your starting point. Build up from there and build your capacity. People don't do that. For some reason in the entrepreneurial space, you just have to go balls to the wall with everything. And if you can't do balls to the wall, you're lazy, you're undisciplined. But apparently in every other aspect of life, like, you know, working out and stuff, everyone gets the idea that you progressively overload the system. You progressively overload it, you know. But in the entrepreneurial space, apparently that doesn't apply because Alex Hormozy said he did 1,000 cold outreaches every day. So if you're not meeting that, if you're not hitting that target, and don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Alex, but like if you don't hit that target, then you're a terrible entrepreneur. You just don't want it enough. You're lazy, you're undisciplined, you're a loser, you shouldn't be doing this, whatever. It's all nonsense. You have to build your capacity, and capacity takes time. But if you build it in a sustainable way, then you'll be able to keep it. You'll be able to maintain it. You'll be able to grow from it. And that's really what you want in the long run.
It's a big thing. When you have the ability to do something, it's a lot easier to do it. But like when I, for example, started writing email copy, it took me a whole week to write 5 emails, and I needed this very good environment, and I needed the right music. I needed everything to work for me. I needed to have the right food. I was very like particular, and it still took me 5 days. I can write 5 emails on a flight, even in economy class on my phone. And I can do it. They're pretty good. They're probably better than the emails I used to write. So, you know, people say like, what's the secret to performance and the secret to, you know, getting to that next level of being efficient and effective? It's like, well, for majority of people, at least copywriters, because most of the copywriters are very relative to the industry, maybe they're not so new, but in relative to other careers and like athletes, for example, train 10 years before they maybe even get onto the sports field for the first time, like in a professional tournament or whatever. A copywriter, you got like a guy that started 6 months ago and he's like, why am I not writing 5 emails a day? It's like, because you suck. Like you just need to get better. If you get better, I've written 5,000 emails. So if I can write an email on a plane, It's not because I'm this super disciplined, crazy, strong mindset person. I'm good at it. It doesn't require as much mental energy. I have a lot of stamina for creative ideas because I did this for so many years without anything else. So like a lot of these mental obstacles, or people believe are like limiting beliefs or mindset issues, it's like, actually, you're just very new. You're new, you find friction, you procrastinate, you're struggling, you're frustrated. All these things you're dealing with are not all mindset things. They're just the experience of a beginner. Beginners experience this. This is just what beginners feel. When I went to start working out in the gym, first like time I started to actively lift weights, I felt that as well. And I was like, why is it taking so long to do this workout? Why am I like so tired after just a few minutes? And it's like, because I don't lift weights. Like now I know. Now I lift weights for a few years, and I like, okay, I can lift weights, you know? So what do you think? Do you find that that's often the case as well? Like a lot of the time, a lot of these issues is just a lack of experience.
Yeah, and also just the expectation management. Like, and the other side of this, with copywriters in mind, if you want to be a really good copywriter, write more. Like, write more. Don't just write when you need to write for clients, or when you need to, you know, write for your profile, because I've got to write for my profile, because if I don't, then I won't have a client to pay me. You need to write. That's your job. Your job is to be able to write to deadlines. That's what makes you commercially viable. It's to be able to write effectively, quality, to a deadline. You know, it's the difference between an artist and graphic designer. Graphic designer has to create art that is commercially viable and that can be done to a deadline. An artist can take as long as they want, and it doesn't have to be commercially viable. You're not an artist. You're somebody in the commercial market. So what you're really being paid to do is to produce. And some of that is, you need to treat being good at copywriting like athletes treat being an athlete. You need to put in you got to do the drills. You got to like work on your skill set. You got to work on your weaknesses. You got to build constraints, not just, oh shit, the client needs work, I'm going to do the copy now. You actually need to practice your skill set. I need to practice my skill set. Otherwise, and not only practice it, but see how I can make it better, how I can improve on it, how I can potentially evolve it, make it more effective, make it more efficient. And particularly with creative endeavors, and copywriting is a creative endeavor to a degree. It's kind of creative engineering in a weird way. Creative endeavors require constraint. They require constraints. So what I mean by that is, like, you can't be creative if you don't have constraints. The problem with the modern times, modern world, is we don't have constraints. I can go in Photoshop and I can make pretty much anything. It makes it actually really hard to be creative because I'm not putting any constraints. So sometimes I will tell copywriters something as simple as write a whole bunch of headlines, but only give yourself like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Or, you know, write a lead. Yeah. Pick a random idea and write a lead based on like the random, like find a connection between a lamppost and the lead that you're trying to create. Like, that's how you're going to sharpen your creativity. And you need your creativity to be accessible to a deadline. You don't get to muse about.
That's interesting.
But that's a skill, and you can develop that.
So that's probably why a lot of copywriters get really good in-house positions and agencies, is because they get forced into many, many different constraints. So that creativity is not just this free-flowing, how I feel, like fluff, you know? It's like, okay, you have to apply your mind to create this converting piece of copy in this format for this audience to this product by tomorrow. It's like, get going. Now it's like applied, versus copywriters sitting there like, oh, I don't really know how to get good at writing. I've never written any copy before. Let me write something. Let's write an email. I mean, I had a few copywriting, and like I was a guest coach in a program, and some people would just send me copy for review. And I'm like, what is this? It's just practice email. What's a practice email? Oh, I'm just practicing. Okay, but I don't know what product you're selling. Are you selling it for real? Like it's not a real product. It's not even a real business. There's nothing that they're selling. It's just an email about something. And it's like, you're not going to get good like this because it's not a real email. Why don't you come back next week, and pick a real business and a real product to sell, and then show me copy for that real business. Let me see 3 emails. Now we've got some constraints. So I like, that's very fascinating. That is,
because
it's good.
Creativity is the ability to find associations that weren't there before, but you need constraint for that. If you look at all of history, right, as far as graphic design and design in general, the constraints have been 2-part. There've been social constraints and there's been technological constraints. So those technological constraints and those social constraints lead to certain movements, art styles or design styles that come about because you literally are constrained by technology and you're constrained by certain social values at the time. But the world we live in today doesn't have any of that. You just have this boundless, endless accessibility to anything, design anything, build anything, do anything, and it actually makes it more difficult to be creative.
Right.
Because
that's interesting.
With constraint, you're going to find new connections. You find new connections when you create constraints. So like, for instance, an exercise they get comedians to do is like, pick 2 things and then why is that thing like that thing? A kettle is like pad thai. And then like you're forced to find the association between those 2 things.
Interesting.
So you start creating new connections. You start creating new avenues to approach it. And then the other thing about creativity is it doesn't happen in a vacuum. Like you don't get creative by sitting in a basement with no inspiration around you and never going out and doing anything. Like if you get comedians, right, really good comedians, they'll create their act over time. But what happens is they start going on the road for long periods of time and all they see is the inside of a motel room. So what happens is they start to lose their ability to come up with new material because they've got nothing going on to inspire ideas, to inspire new thoughts. And if you think that sitting on Facebook in marketing groups is inspiring, it's not. You need to actually experience the world. Like, that's where all the products and services that you're trying to sell live. So like you need to actually absorb inspiration from around you. Like go to a gallery, go to a concert, go and look at the products and services of your competitors in the real world. Like be engaged with that kind of stuff. And then the third component is write down ideas like comedians do. Write them down, have a notepad or something, carry the ideas, like have them there so that when you actually sit down, you already have some sort of source of like ignition for giving you some idea. Don't try to be inspired when you're sitting there looking at the screen. Yeah. And designers know this. A lot of designers know this because if you go to a good designer, graphic designer, before they start working on your logos and stuff, what are they going to do? They're going to pull out a whole bunch of logo design books and they're going to browse through them and they're going to look for inspiration. They're going to be like, oh, that looks cool. That could work. Maybe I've got an idea about this. They're going to get the inspiration and then they're going to start working on, okay, how do I do this? What am I going to do?
We've literally mapped out everything from starting from the point of thinking for a copywriter. Like I could almost call this the last video, like the last mindset video you'll ever need as a copywriter, because we went from talking about performance and finding your strengths and finding where you really need to work and your talents to how to treat yourself as a business and actually generate income for yourself, all the way to actually how to write really compelling copy and build a system for producing ideas constant. I love it. And that's why I'm a big believer in, like, this is where the foundation always comes from, always starts here, because all of the stuff we talked about today really does just start there. Where can people find you if they wanted to get some coaching or get some support? Where can people contact you?
Yeah, the best place to contact me is just on my Facebook profile. I actually, run pretty pretty streamlined. So it's facebook.com/George K Coach.
George K Coach. Nice.
Yep.
So
And
George and then
I'll
K
happily
and then
like to hear from them.
yeah. I'd love people to reach out to you, and if they need any help with what you do, for they'll. I think you'll be in good hands if you want to get support from George. So, George, I really appreciate your time today. This is great. I learned a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of notes over here in my little notebook. So, thanks so much for your time, and I'll chat with you soon.
Thank you, my friend.